time I was 17, I was a homeless kid living on the streets addicted to heroin. And I think for a very specific reason. I think that for me, the heroin just shut me down. It allowed me to kind of escape the world, escape emotion, escape responsibility. And so it had, even though it was a total disconnection from the world, it also had its currency, and that currency was no responsibility. So 25 years ago, I was, a typical street kid. I think the difference was that I came from a really good family. I had a mom that loved me to pieces, had an older brother, younger sister, pretty typical, normal, middle-class kid in Canada. Made some poor choices really young. When I was 9 or 10, I started using drugs. By the time I was 15, I was non-compliant at home, meaning I just didn't get along at home anymore. By the time I was 16, I was getting in trouble with the law, and by the time I was 17, I left my hometown of Barrie, Ontario, and I went to Vancouver, and I found myself at 17 years old living on the streets of Vancouver without any kind of parental supervision or anybody watching over my shoulder. I quickly made a really serious poor choice and got into intravenous drugs. I had a father like many people. He was my hero. He was someone I looked up to, someone who was loved and respected. He was snatched away from us at a very young age. He was 35 years old. I was 8. In 1975, he dropped dead from a heart attack, and our family changed. And the man who would take his seat was, nothing like my father. So I went from this loving, supporting, caring man in my life, whom I looked up to, who, in his shadow I felt like I could do or be anything, to, a guy who wasn't like that at all. He was abusive. He'd say things like, "You're stupid, you're dumb, you never amount to anything." At 8, 9 years old, I already had some hairline fractures in my self-worth. That didn't help things. And so that relationship with my stepfather really were the seeds of rebellion in me. Late 1989, in the winter, December, I met a gentleman on a park bench out front of Army and Navy, right down near Pigeon Park in downtown East Vancouver. I saddled up beside this guy because he had a cigarette hanging out of his mouth, and I was a mooch. I mean, give it a name, right? I basically came up to mooch a cigarette off him, and he gave me the cigarette, so I went the next step and asked him for a couple bucks. But he then laid something on me that was incredibly valuable, and it's been a mantra in my life. And he said to me, he says, we got chatting for a little while, and he got to know my name. He says, Joe, he says, there's more in you than you can see.
When I met Joe a couple of years ago, before we decided to start working together, we really found that we shared a similar driving purpose, or what you might call a big why. And that's really about trying to extract the best out of people. It's a passion for helping people. And the real starting point to that is actually seeing something extraordinary or something amazing, seeing possibility in the people around you. Joe had just come back from an engagement with a client where that client actually run a conference where they'd really given back. They'd given back to a street organization, helping kids who did live in the street, and it got Joe and I talking about, well, how can we do that? How can we do that on a national level? And this might be the ticket to us really making a difference. And in that context, I kind of had this idea, like it just popped to my mind, of this kind of vision of Joe pushing a shopping cart across the nation. And I spoke the words. I said, well, I don't know, Joe, why don't you push a shopping cart across Canada?
Well, the trek, it was a lot of lead up time to June 28th, when we actually, myself and Robert, got in the RV here in Vancouver and drove to Calgary. The ideal was we go start in Calgary and work our way back to Vancouver, because Vancouver's my hometown. It's also the neighborhood that I escaped from 23 years ago. So going into July 1st, there was a lot of anxiety. Like, how am I going to be able to walk 24 kilometers every single day, 6 days on, 1 day off? That frightened me. The more memorable moments, probably Rogers Pass, Kicking Horse Pass.
Early intervention is really about getting kids to that early stage when they're probably in a space of turmoil. They might be struggling with some self-esteem issues. Maybe it's, they might be going through some tough times in family, or bullying in school, or any number of factors that around adversity that are challenging to themselves and may leave them feeling a bit less than. And late intervention is probably Joe's story, very much. It's about this idea that here he was living on the streets of downtown Vancouver, pushing a shopping cart around, sleeping under a bridge, heroin addict. Many people would walk by someone like that and say lost cause. Late intervention is about saying it's never too late.
I want to thank the entire TELUS team, who through generous contribution and support have allowed us to do this. Cloverdale Paint is also a partner of ours who supported us. We want to thank Elks Canada, again, another partner of ours. Lastly, I want to thank the Salvation Army.
You know, up until 10 days ago, coming into the downtown east side, we didn't expect what we got. I didn't even know if we were going to have a police escort or if I was going to have to walk that shopping cart on the sidewalk. And then we hit those buildings where it echoed. And I don't know whose idea it was, but they just started hollering, "Go, Joe, go. Go, Joe, go." You know, and I just felt a lot of pride.
That final kilometer really stood out because it really did exceed expectations, and there are people behind this, and overwhelmed with what Joe has done and what the Push for Change stands for.
For back those blocks left years behind before I found the key, I realized that kid I saw was nothing more than me. Behind me is a broken man, a man you see now free. Life is grand when we understand. There's more to us than what we see.
You know, sometimes it's a long, hard road, and as days pass, you feel you've lost all hope.
Gotta have your Jimmy, baby.
Have courage to fight the people around you care. There's no wrong or right, just a love that we can share. Ain't no pain, how we've suffered along the way. Underneath our clothes, our souls remain unchanged. Take off your mask of fear and push for change. Throw off your coat of doubt and embrace the rain. Everyone is unique, yet we're a part of the human race. We can't do this alone, so together we'll push for change.